friends, my apologies for not being on here for a while, traveling and being my own secretary, because who's going to do admin for my business? Me. But that doesn't mean I can't hop on when I can. And today we are covering Maria Catala Beauty. And my apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right, but based on where the accent is on the last A in her last name, that's where I'm placing the emphasis. But Beautylish did send me Maria's new brush collection set, which I was quite shocked by. I had no idea that Maria released a brush collection. I didn't even know about her brand. I arrived last night, well, early this morning, saw the package, opened it, and was just delighted and grateful as always for the opportunity. And my apologies again, I'm so many sorries in this video. I had wanted to film more formally with overhead shots, individual brush shots, as I like to do with my brush videos, but I decided just to go in with everyone and test the brushes out individually. Also read out the details from the product page on Beautylish. So we are going over the Maria Catala Beauty brush collection, exclusively available on Beautylish. And again, a huge thank you to them for sending me this in PR. And I understand if you have any reservations about those who receive PR and share their first impressions and review details. So please, I encourage you to watch another review from someone who purchased the brushes or used them longer than me, because this is a first impressions video as I am just cracking into this package, but I will certainly give more details and feedback as the month progresses, because I will continue to use these brushes. So if you want to come along on the adventure in exploring the new Maria Catala brush collection, then let's get started. Fun fact, one of my audio files became corrupted and I wasn't able to edit my entire complexion and cheek portion, so we're gonna film it again. The brush collection does retail for $270, but individuals are sold. And these brushes are made in China, and that's probably because a lot of the manufacturing for this newer synthetic fiber technology is taking place there, and it makes sense given the feel of the brush and how this brush collection, or rather how Maria wanted to have the blue squirrel mimicking fibers in these brushes, but we'll go over them again one by one. And I wanted to start with the setting brush and wanted to give you a close-up here also that apparently the inspiration behind the edge or the tip of the handle is from how Maria likes to wear her nails. So it's almost like the extension of the artist's hands, or more specifically her hand. You can see that there's a demi-gloss finish on the handle and ferrule. You have Maria Catala here engraved on the top part of the handle, and the number here on gold print, or gold ink I should say. And here is a close-up of the N1 face brush. These fibers are said to mimic blue squirrel, and if you are a Frenzzz collector or an enthusiast, I consider myself an enthusiast, collector status is still one that I yet have to achieve. You might be wondering how this compares to an actual squirrel brush, and I have a few on standby, but according to the product page for the N1, this brush is meant for a multitude of tasks: setting powder, blush, bronzer, and highlight. And with that said, I probably should pull you in a little closer. I have the Givenchy Glow Serum Foundation on, Burberry Concealer under the eyes, and my Tuckahoe brow pencil, and I think it's khaki. But I wanted to demonstrate the setting powder, or using setting powder with the N1, and I have my Hourglass translucent pressed powder here. Nice pickup, right? Pretty even. And in terms of how the brush feels, it is quite soft. Now, for someone who uses blue squirrel brushes, this doesn't feel the same. It does attempt to feel the same in that it is quite soft, and you can actually bring this around for some nice circular blending and setting, or you could take more of a tap down approach like I demonstrated here for the under eye setting. And the distribution of product is quite nice. It's even, it's lightweight enough. Does this have the same silky feel as real blue squirrel? It does not. That's not necessarily a good or bad thing. That's just a preference. The thing is, if you're one who always used synthetic brushes and you would never use a natural hair brush, then you don't have anything to compare it to. So if you feel this brush, it will feel quite silky and soft to your skin. which it is. But if you're one that toggles between and that tries both types of brushes, I thought about the classic Tuckahoe blush brush. Here they are side by side. This is real blue squirrel, and this is the synthetic blue squirrel from the Catala set. And there's just no comparison in terms of feel. There is a fluidity and a silkiness that only, well, that's not true. Other types of brush types like Kazan Squirrel, Tuckahoe, I mean, I could go on with the higher tier types of bristles, just dreamlike in terms of feel. But this is quite nice for sure. And in terms of how the brush feels, that tapered handle and how it comes to this finer tip with the flat edge, and I love the gold detailing here, it feels quite lightweight, but it does feel thin on the grip. So you might have to grab it a little higher if you want a more sturdy handle on the brush. But if you want something lighter, holding it lower on the edge of the handle could feel a little strange, but it really all depends on your preference. Now, before I move on, I wanted to apply bronzer using the N1, and I demonstrated yesterday going in with my BBB bronzing matte brick. And this, well, the powder itself is quite soft. I would just tap because this picks up quite a lot. And I do like the N1 for more precise bronzer placement, in that it's not going to envelop a large region at once, right? So if you wanted a little more of a contouring, not from the color itself, but in terms of the placement, if you wanted to use a more neutral color or you wanted the bronzer to appear more precise, this brush is great for hollows of the cheeks. And to quickly demonstrate now, well, I could do either or. The N1 will do well with either loose powder or pressed powder format, but I'll go in with Valentino's Sweet Rebel Eye to Cheek Blush or Eyeshadow and Blush. Nice pickup as well. With this type of a brush, because on the close-up you saw that it came to that slight taper, this is nice for the tap go around, but also has enough flexibility for the circular application, where it will take that blush around the apples of the cheeks in an even fashion. And you can see nice fit here for the cheekbones. And I could show you this edge again. I have two highlighters on standby actually. I did order the new YSL in Hypnotic Honey. Unfortunately, it is not slated to arrive until next week, but that softer powder I think will be interesting to find a brush that would pair well with it. For now, I think this brush is stiff enough to maybe try it with the Gucci. This is a gel to powder texture. You can see from my fingerprints how it has more of like that putty consistency, but because the brush has a little bit of stiffness to it, not that it feels harsh, but it doesn't have the same flexibility as the Tuckahoe brush, for instance. If I were to press, you see how much fold that has compared to the N1, which I thought would be great for a texture that's a little tougher to pick up. And I think this is a great brush for the Gucci highlighter. So you see that placement, nice and even, doesn't pick up too much, but you can control the intensity of the highlighter, right? So that's one side, and I wanted to save the other side for the other two brushes we have in the complexion category. Moving on to N2, the highlighter brush. This retails for $31, and you can see how, based off how the bristles look like, again, mimicking the blue squirrel bristle. I have an old refer brush that never came into fruition, but this is where synthetic fibers come in clutch. When it comes to these types of shapes, this is a synthetic and goat hair combination. You see with the natural hair in this slanted kind of longer construction, it tends to look a little broomsticky, that there's not a lot of uniformity. It kind of looks electrocuted, right? So it doesn't look as compact as with synthetic fiber. So that is something to consider depending on the brush shape sometimes synthetic is better in terms of how you want the brush head to look. But I do have my Concealer brush on standby. This is actual Blue Squirrel, but a little different. It doesn't have that sharp slant like you see in Maria's N2. This is a rounder ferrule. Well, I would say both are round, but this is significantly smaller. And the dome or the slant for the Concealer brush is not as sharp and angled as the N2, but you can see the N2 is fantastic for highlighter. Now, spoiler alert, I tried this with bronzer yesterday. Nice to get that nudged application into the hollows of the cheeks. Not my favorite for blush with pressed formulas. Maybe we could try it with loose today. But I wanted to show you those two comparisons. Let's now get into a softer, or what I consider a still soft powder, the YSL bronzing powder. Would I consider the VBB to be a little softer? Maybe by a touch. But I wanted to show you, if you wanted a brush of this size and design to use it with bronzer, how that's going to be a lot more precise than what you saw on this side with the N1. I would recommend you start at the highest region of your cheekbone or hollow of the cheek area. And then this brush has really nice flexibility to move the powder around, but I think it best paired with a powder that has nice maneuverability on the skin, right? Which is why I think the YSL bronzing powder is one of my best bronzing powders in my collection, is the blendability, the silkiness of the texture. And even with the small brush like this, I still feel successful on that blend, but you see how it packs a punch because it is smaller and concentrated. Just something to consider. You don't necessarily have to use this brush for this task, but I just wanted to show you in case. Now, I think this brush will fare better with loose powder because I tried it yesterday with the Valentino and it just didn't move around the powder as well as I would have liked. And I think it's because it's maybe a little too flexible, maybe for this formula specifically, but if we tried it with a loose powder, perhaps we could get a little more of this going. Tapped once and we'll ensure that all powder is in the bristles. And this time I'll start mid-cheek and then bring it a touch lower. Better than the loose powder, but because the brush is on the smaller side, you might have to spend time in just kind of spreading out that application. But I do prefer this brush with loose powder textures or formulas, I should say, versus pressed. But that's not bad, right? I think the end result is what matters, but I'd rather get there faster with a larger cheek brush. And this time I would like to try a softer highlighter powder formula, and we're going into the Dior Forever Glow Luminizer. This is in 01 Halo. I would recommend this brush with something like the Gucci, because in my opinion, I don't think it will pick up as evenly as a softer powder because the bristles are just a little too flexible for that, in my opinion. However, something like this, I think a little more successful, and the edge fits quite well over the cheekbones. You will have to build, see I'm swirling here because I'm trying to get enough powder on the brush, so I'm satisfied with the end result. And I think that's pretty nice. So for the N2, I would use primarily for highlighter, as you just saw. For bronzer, despite you might having to spend a little time in getting the right type of gradient going, for blush, might not be my go-to. I would grab the other brush, the N3, which we'll get to in a minute. And like I had said, really like the highlight application there because of the small brush size and the flat edge that fits quite well here on the cheekbone. You could probably use the edge of the brush, albeit softly, because there's not a lot of feedback here or strength with the very tip of the brush. However, that might work in your favor if you're looking to just get the tiniest amount going here on the inside of the higher part of the nose, right? If you're into this type of a placement. But I would actually grab another brush for this task because look, even though it's quite soft, it probably applied a little too much. So now grabbing the N1 to diffuse that. One other task you could probably use the N2 with is for finishing. And it is a small brush, so you'll probably be there for a little bit, but maybe that's your preference, that a smaller brush is probably more precise. Maybe you just want to set on this area, that you're not looking to set the entire face, but just around the cheek area or the areas that tend to look textured, and we could test that out maybe with an hourglass powder. I'm just wiping here to ensure that I don't have any blush or highlight on the N2, and now dipping in to soft light. And I could just go around softly here on the cheek, around the cheekbone. And I think the N2 is quite nice for finishing. So something to consider if you are trying to expand your task list for the N2. Up next, we have the N3 Powder Cheek Brush. This retails for $37. And a few of my favorite wedge brushes, I couldn't find an all Tuckahoe goat one. I'm thinking the Rapper 05, but just couldn't find it. I do have, however, Sonia's Lotus Detail Brush on standby, as well as Surratt's Slanted Cheek Brush. I think this might be a mixture of goat and blue squirrel. This is, I believe, undyed and dyed Tuckahoe goat hair, and this is supposed to mimic, the synthetic fibers are supposed to mimic Tuckahoe goat hair. The angle is not intense, is actually quite moderate, and I did use this yesterday to apply VBB's bronzer. Now, I could apply just a touch more so you can see it in action. Naturally, if you prefer an angled cheek brush over a oval domed one, like seen in the N1, this will probably be your choice for the hollows of the cheeks, and you could start high, bring it lower. You could also apply blush with this brush. You could go around for setting. I do feel the N1 and also N2 has just better movement on the skin. There's a strange start and stop feel when it comes to synthetic goat hair bristles. It's hard to explain. You have to use both synthetic and natural, I think, to fully grasp what I'm trying to describe. There's just, again, a smoothness and uninterrupted flow of a blend from a natural hair brush that just can't be or is tough to replicate with synthetic fibers. However, it is soft, and if you have ultra sensitive skin to natural hair brushes, you're like, I love them, but they feel prickly, then this will be your choice. This is probably my favorite brush out of the complexion category, the N4. The cream cheek brush, $37. And when it comes to cream products, synthetic has a slight edge over natural in that the fibers are just more resilient. They can stand up against more frequent washing, and again, doesn't absorb as much product, so you have more of that application from your favorite cream or liquid cheek product. And of course, I wanted to demonstrate with Haus Labs Glassy Blush Balm Stick in Glassy Cinnamon. I usually like to warm up cream products on the back of my hand first, and the N4 has pretty nice density and flexibility at the same time. You could probably use this for foundation application. It will take you a little bit because of the small brush head size, but does it move quickly across the face? If you were considering that, I would probably demonstrate that in another video because I already have my foundation on. But this is fantastic for cream blush application because it has pretty nice splay to cover the cheek region, but also offers control because of the smaller brush head size. You could also use this for more concentrated application from your favorite cream or liquid bronze product if you wanted to start here into the hollows and then bring it down around the larger cheek area. You could bring some color on the edge here of the brush, down the nose. You could tap around here on the higher edges of your forehead, bring some color down through the jawline. So if you were wondering and figuring out if I need to buy one brush, which one would it be? If you are a heavy cream product user, all the way from foundation to cheek products, I would consider getting the N4. The second one I would consider is getting the N1 because this is quite versatile with powder products, but you can use this with cream if you like. I think it a little flexible for a cream cheek product, but probably really nice for liquid foundation or even like a creamier type, maybe not super creamy because this is probably too flexible to get a good blend on the skin, but something to consider. The third will be the N2. Nice brush, but not as versatile as these two. And my least favorite is the N3, just because I have other brushes that feel better, and I don't necessarily rely on the shape totally. Although I do love the angled shape, again, I don't feel it important to have the specific shape for certain makeup applications when I have these already. Now moving on to eyes, let's first start with here the N7 blending brush. This looks like your quintessential all-purpose eye brush that can be used to lay down color on the lid, to blend color through the crease here, maybe tap a little bit of highlighter, pack on color on the outer lid. But first, let's apply a little bit of primer before we get into the demo. I thought it'd be fun to hop back into Viseart's Citaneuse. So let's take this light beige shade and tap it here on the brow arch. Feels soft already. Oh, picked up too much. I underestimate a synthetic eye brush's ability to pick up product. Now, this bristle is also meant to mimic goat hair, and it feels pretty soft, and I like how it feels through the crease. So let's pick up this rose color here, or I guess it's more like a clay. I'll start on the very edge of my crease. I'll tap and then bring it along in a circular fashion. This eye brush is quite nice. It has beautiful movement. And the brush I was thinking about was the Tuckahoe Takumi, specifically here the T7. You can see that they are similarly shaped. You have the pinched ferrule. This comes up to maybe a sharper edge, and the T7 is a little more rounded here on the edges, and I would use this in the same fashion. The thing is, with eye brushes and synthetic ones specifically, they will feel softer than natural hair brushes unless the natural hair brush is Blue Squirrel, Kazan, Kolinsky, right? That higher grade fiber versus a synthetic one. So you will feel more prickliness from a goat hair eye brush than you would from a synthetic one. But let's see how it does with laying down product on the lid. This is a little flexible, so I will go in windshield wiper motion instead of striking down to ensure I get enough product on the brush, and then I'll pull it across my lid. Not too bad. There is a packer brush in the set, but it's nice to know I could get a decent amount of sparkle if I use the N7, which, did I say was $28? It's $28. My small hooded eyes are rejoicing. The N8 Small Blend Brush. This is, again, based on how the bristles look to mimic Blue Squirrel. Great for that outer edge and also to get into the nooks and crannies of your eyes. I can stick to the same eye actually to demonstrate how well this can smoke out, right? And this is a small dome, as you see. Nice pickup there. Does this have, I think it's even on the dome. No, it's even. I was going to say it had a slant, but it's pretty even on the cut around. I'll first tap on the very outer edge starting at the lash line, and then I'll tap higher here and start to swirl and twirl in order to smoke out that piece of my lid. And then I'll slowly bring that shadow through my crease, not all the way, just enough to create that gradient. And that's nice. Even application, it feels soft on the skin. And as you can see, ultra precise with that lay down of color. And also nice and precise if you needed a more precise blending brush. One that still blends, but will be small enough to get into the nooks and crannies of your eyes. Let's see if I can do that with this midnight shade here with the same brush. Just start here on the outer part and then slowly take it through the crease and form what I like to call the hazy point. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. Now, I do feel the need to hold the brush higher because I don't feel as much stability because of the thinner handle. So notice I am holding it higher just to establish a sturdier grip on the handle. Just wanted to mention that because if you like girthier handles, you probably are not going to be crazy with these handles. But you saw I went a little overboard there. So I'm going back in with my N7 just to blur the edges so they appear softer. Not too bad. Now we could get into some packing. The N9 Eye Shader Brush, you have a little bit of a dome. It's not super short, but pretty stiff. So this is going to be fantastic for that shiny pickup. And I'm definitely going in windshield wiper motion. So we get ample color there. And we'll go in on the lid. And not bad. Fantastic pickup. Even lay down, much more so than the N7, but the N7 is a little more versatile, and the shader brush has a more specific role in picking up color and laying it down more heavily on the lid, as you can see. And I can imagine also how it's fantastic, because we just have one brush left. Fantastic for inner corner highlight, picking up a little bit here and then punching that on the inner part of my eye. Now, there could be a smaller brush to fit into the nudge here of the lower inner lash line, but not everyone does that, so it's probably not necessary. Let me pick up another color for the first eye. I'm gonna pick up this more silvery, I guess, taupey type of a shade, and great for the inner highlight lay down here. And I can still get a little application of color on the lower inner lash line with this brush if I wanted. Don't mind me, I'm just blending this out more. I underestimated the power of that little blending brush. And we have a lip and concealer brush. I did not realize I could apply concealer, but once you see the size of this brush, you're gonna be like, wait. Oh, but we have what might be my favorite out of all the eye brushes, the N10 Arrowhead Brush. I love arrowheads because they are fantastic for picking up and blending due to the construction where the tip of the brush is fantastically flexible for some crease blending. But because I've already done both eyes, I will demonstrate how this can be or work out with lower lash line haze. I picked up the same color I applied on the outer lid, and now just running this brush along the lower lash line. And because the edge fits so beautifully well here underneath without dropping too low, this is, you know, my preferred way sometimes to wear eyeshadow under the eyes, but I would suggest you pick up a smaller brush to get a little more precise. Also, I can show what this can do on the lid. What color did I pick up for? I think it was this one. Maybe the Arrowhead will pick up more than the N7, and that it does. So if you wanted a little more of a blend function from your eye brush than you would get from a shader construction, a shader design, Arrowhead will be the one to go with because it's going to pick up more than the N7, not as much as the N8, but also have more blending capability, or excuse me, the N9. The N9 is the shader brush. This is going to have more blending capability than the N9, especially if you wanted something more multifaceted. Picking up this gray stone color and just running it through my crease. Again, great flexibility here through the crease, where this is probably alongside the N7 and One and Done eyeshadow brush, where you can use the flat side to apply your lid color, and also to tap on some outer corner color here, bring it through the crease, use the edge to apply color here under the lash line, and be done. The very, very tippity tip for the inner corner highlight, but because it is so flexible at that part of the brush, a softer powder will work better than like a gelée texture. And lastly, we have the N17 Lip and Concealer Brush, $24. Now, I wouldn't use this maybe for under eye concealing because I'll be there all day, but pinpoint concealing, like for this little guy here, wonderfully accurate and will not overwhelm the skin with product. That's where I would take concealer on back of hand or from a palette, get some here, and then wonderful to get more accurate with the coverage without having to use a larger brush. And for lips, wonderful, as you can see. This is one of the longer lip brushes that I have. I have a few that are shorter than this, but not super short, but just I would assume the feel of it would be wonderful. So I'm picking up a little bit of Glassy Cinnamon because the blush sticks do double as for blush and lip, and I'll take it along for the ride here. Maybe I should pick up a little bit more. Let me pick up a little bit more. And this is insanely precise on the edges of the lip, right? Because of the longer brush construction, you can get right there, and also feels satisfying to paint along the edges of your lip. All right, let's slap on some lashes and I'll be right back. And here are the close-ups from our demo using Maria Catala brushes. And my apologies once you see the main footage, how the lighting's a little off because it's raining now, the clouds are in, but it's okay, we're gonna survive. I just wanted to share a few of my recommendations as I know the brush set can be expensive, and if you were looking at a few, definitely would recommend from the complexion category, either N1 or N4, is it? Yes. It just has 401 on the brush, but the letter N on the product page. Figure that one out. These are the two that I would recommend. The other two are great. I just find that I wouldn't use these as often. So just something to consider. And out of the eye and lip brushes, where there's just the one lip brush, typically I don't use lip brushes all the time. One that again, if it's in the set, it's in the set. But if you're buying these individually, wouldn't necessarily reach for this one or buy this one. The 10, the Arrowhead brush, and ooh, you know this was gonna be hard, maybe 3. Number 8, the mini blender, and the number 7, the all-around shader. And the little shader here, great for packing, but sometimes people just use their finger to pack on a shimmer if that's easier. If I had to force myself and pick one eyeshadow brush, it probably will be the number 10, the Arrowhead, because you could get a lot of eye tasks done with this brush, especially if you're a one and doneer. You're not going to apply like 5 shadows I did in this demonstration, at most 2. The first shadow being the all over lid shade, bringing that through the crease, a little bit under the lash line, be it a matte, satin, shimmer, or metallic formula, and then you finish off the edges with the very tip of the brush, which you can also get away with the number 7. Right? So I'm just thinking more so if you wanted to be economical with your brush picks, how many tasks you can cover with one brush. And those would be my main picks from the complexion and cheek category and the eye category. Overall, I think the set is solid. As you saw, I was able to achieve an entire look using all brushes and probably could get away with an entire look using less. I could use the N4, the N1, and the number 10 and the number 7, I think. I forgot the numbers already for the eye brushes, I'm so sorry. To complete my entire face and be done. Now, for someone who uses both synthetic and natural hair brushes, I think Maria's brushes have a place in my collection. I don't know if it will be something that I would grab right away, just because thinking through my favorite Frenzzz brushes, my complexion and eye routines are covered head to toe, and I have exceptionally crafted brushes that are just god tier in terms of application and execution, that the Maria brushes don't necessarily fill in any gaps for me. However, but if you have a smaller collection than I do and you mainly use and purchase synthetic brushes, maybe this is a set you can investigate more, research more. Again, this set was sent to me, so if you wanted to watch another video of someone who purchased the set, who is more well-versed in synthetic brushes than myself. The only other synthetic set I purchased is the Katie Jane Hughes collaboration with Spectrum. That collection was huge. A lot of cheek brushes, a lot of eye brushes. I think what's unique about the Maria Catala collection is mainly how her handles are constructed. I think they are elegant in the aesthetic. They have an upscale feel to them in terms of how they look and how they're constructed. I like how they look more than the Victoria Beckham brushes. The majority of Victoria's brushes are dual-ended, which is not my personal favorite. But if I had to choose in terms of aesthetics, I would choose the Maria brushes over the Victoria ones. Now, I haven't tried the Victoria ones, but I wasn't impressed just by how they looked, and I wasn't entirely sure or didn't hear much about their performance. So this is just an assumption on my part. But back to my original point, if I saw these brushes and I didn't have them, I would not buy them right away personally, or probably not at all. I'm grateful for the opportunity to still review them because of my relationship with Beautylish and them sending the brush sets as PR. But again, you can see how many brush videos I have on my channel and just how exceptional these tools are, unmatched in terms of performance, execution, and just how my makeup looks ever since I had, or rather used, my first Japanese made brush, and that was the Wayne Goss Anniversary 2 collection, the 2 brush set. I'll never forget the first time I tried those brushes. It's like my entire world changed, and it continued to change as I learned more about the different bristle types, the density types, the brush head sizes, how the ferrule affects the performance of the brush and whatnot. So there's so much I still have to learn. Overall, I think the Maria Catala brush set is solid. If you are, again, a collector of synthetic brushes, if you like unique handles, this is something you could probably look into. But if you would like more information about these brushes, I'll be sure to share more details as I continue to use them throughout the month. I have a ton of other makeup products I'm thinking about using them with, and more importantly, the more I use them, the more feedback I will have to share at the end of the month. But those are my initial thoughts from these demonstrations and thinking about it. As after I actually finished the first part of this video, I had to teach a live and then had lunch, and now we're back. So I had time to melt with my thoughts, if you will. So let me know what you think down below about the Maria Catala brush collection, if you had your eye on it, what you think about it, if you already have purchased some of her brushes. And if you made it this far, make sure you like this video by clicking that thumbs up. It helps me immensely in letting know the algorithm that I'm worth watching, and will also recommend my videos to other beauty enthusiasts like yourself. And consider subscribing. There'll be more brush videos to come, but you'll know when those uploads drop when you click that notification bell. And in the meantime, you can watch my other brush videos on my brush playlist. And if you want to check out a recent shot with me where I just deliberated with myself in figuring out what my next beauty purchase will be, I can see you in that video down in the comments for this video. Now I'm here again next time.